Vihari. Jai Vishnupad Paramangsa Parirajikacharya Astatara Satya Shri Śrimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Bhavishta Om Vishnupad Paramangsa Parirajikacharya Astatara Satya Shri Śrimad Divine Grace Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Shila Haridas Thakur Ki Grantaraj Śrimad Bhāgavatam Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glory to the Summa devotees. All glory to the Summa devotees. All glory to the Summa devotees. All glory to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Srila Prabhupada. Namaste, Saraswati Gormani Pachai Nivashesha Srinivadi Pashat Shatare. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. Volume 6, chapter titled At Home in Vrindavan. The room was very dark except for a night light behind the head of Srila Prabhupada's bed. Devotees were chanting softly, using only one tiny pair of kartals for keeping rhythm. Tripurari Swami was massaging Srila Prabhupada's feet, Bhagatji his right leg, and Tamal Krishna his left arm. Suddenly, Narayan Maharaj from the Devananda Saraswati Mat in Mathura entered along with two of his men. Prabhupada's disciples immediately gave him a seat at the side of the bed. Srila Prabhupada began speaking, but so softly that Narayan Maharaj had to lean over to hear. Seeing a conversation about to begin, the devotees in the room, numbering about 15 or 20, moved in closer. Srila Prabhupada began. Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said that we should preach in Europe, America. That was his desire. And his other desire was that we all would work together jointly to preach. Yes, that is right, said Narayan Maharaj. I didn't waste a single moment, said Srila Prabhupada. I tried my best, and it has been successful to some extent. Srila Prabhupada's voice was choked with emotion. If we work conjointly, he continued, then as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Priti Vitte. Sankirtan has great possibilities. My life is coming to an end. It is my desire that you will all forgive me for my mistakes. My God, brothers, when you are preaching at times, there are some disputes, some misunderstandings. Maybe I also committed some offenses like that. Please ask them to forgive me. When I am gone, you will all sit together and decide how you can manage for some utsava, or festival for me. How much should we pay? What do you think of this? Whatever instructions you give me, said Narayan Maharaj, I will follow them with absolute sincerity. I consider you my guru. Narayan Maharaj said that what Srila Prabhupada had created should be protected, and it was everyone's duty to do so. He pledged to help in whatever way he could. Srila Prabhupada inquired if his godbrothers who had temples in Mathura Vrindavan were present. Narayan Maharaj replied that most of them were out of station. Regarding Srila Prabhupada's asking his godbrothers for forgiveness, Narayan Maharaj said, there are all trivial things in this worldwide preaching. If some little things go wrong here and there, what difference does it make? It is all right. Whatever you have done for the well-being of the entire human society. There is no individual interest. Everything was done in the interest of God. He advised that Srila Prabhupada not worry. His disciples were worthy and would maintain things. Therefore, Prabhupada should now simply think of the Lord. Narayan Maharaj then asked his assistant, Sheshashayi Brahmachari, to sing Sri Rupa Manjari Pada. While everyone listened in silence and Srila Prabhupada lay still, Sheshashayi Brahmachari sang the song very sweetly. Next, Narayan Maharaj sang a bhajan, finishing with the refrain, Jai Gurudev, Jai Prabhupada. After a pause, Narayan Maharaj spoke again, this time referring to Srila Prabhupada's disciples. They should be told that they should never get motivated by their own self-interest, he said. They should make your mission successful. Srila Prabhupada turned his head slowly, looking over the devotees as they gathered in even more closely. Then slowly he lifted his hand, as if to call them all to attention, and said, "Do not fight among yourselves. I have given direction in my books." He then lowered his hand. Prabhupada's godbrother Intupati entered the room. Srila Prabhupada heard his greeting and repeated his request. "First of all, I want to say forgive me for all of my offenses. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but while preaching one has to sometimes say something that may offend others. Will you forgive me?" Yes, Indupati said. "Maharaj, you didn't commit any offense," said Narayan Maharaj. "We never thought that you did anything wrong. On the other hand, you bless us. We need it. You never did any wrong. If someone is offended by your actions, that is his fault." Narayan Maharaj then gently took Srila Prabhupada's right hand and felt his pulse. After a moment or two, he said, "Pulse is all right, and your consciousness is perfect. If you have to go by the will of the Lord, then you will go perfectly." Promising to return again, Narayan Maharaj asked permission to leave, and he and Indupati and their party left the room. Srila Prabhupada's disciples moved back and remained silent, not wanting to instigate any conversation to unnecessarily tax Prabhupada. They appreciated Narayan Maharaj's words, but there was another final goodbye. Before the atmosphere of despair could engulf them, they began again their soft singing kirtan. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Śrimad Bhāgavatam, 3rd Canto, 25th chapter, text 14. Tam imang te pravakshami yam avochang puranage rishinang shrotu kamanang yogam sarvanga naipunam tam imang te pravakshami yam avochang puranage rishinang shotukamanang yogam sarvanga naipunam. Please chant. Tamimang te pravakshami prananage Tam imam preparakshami yam avochang puranage Rishinang Sutakamanam Yogam Sarvangana Punam Tamimang Teva Vakshami Hemavocham Puranage. Ladies, Yam Rocham Pralanage Shinam Shrotakamanam Yogam Samaganapunam. Anyone else? Tamimam, that very, te, to you, Parakshami, I shall explain, yam, which, avocham, I explained, Pura, formerly, Anage, O pious mother, Rishinang, to the sages, Srutukamanang, eager to hear, Yogam, yoga system, Sarvanga, in all respects, Naipunam, serviceable and practical. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. O most pious Mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga system, which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in every way. Please repeat. O most pious Mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga system, which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in every way. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord does not manufacture a new system of yoga. Sometimes it is claimed that someone has become an incarnation of God and is expounding a new theological aspect of the absolute truth. But here we find that although Kapila Muni is the Lord himself and is capable of manufacturing a new doctrine for his mother, he nevertheless says, I shall just explain the ancient system which I once explained to the great sages, because they were also anxious to hear about it. When we have a super excellent process already present in Vedic scriptures, there is no need to concoct a new system to mislead the innocent public. At present, it has become a fashion to reject the standard system and present something bogus in the name of a newly invented process of yoga. Om Jnana Timranda Shagananjana Shakaya Chaksuram Latamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Lokam Karoti Vachalam Pango Mankai Tegaram Yakripatamaham Bandesh Shri Gurum Dinatarnam. Evam Parampara Praptam. So this science as it is appears to be lost, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. And here again, and this, as Prabhupada mentions in the lecture in Bombay in 1974, that this is spoken millions of years before the Bhagavad Gita. So this is not something new. And just to confirm, Prabhupada mentions here in the purport that it is not something that should be considered malleable. Does everyone know what malleable is? You take some soft metal and you can pound it into different shapes. Any material means bend or shape. So this philosophy has a very intricate process of being passed down from the disciplic succession, which is why such great care is there to preserve that tradition. And there is, in Prabhupada's Samadhi in Vrindavan, above the altar and going around the temple, we have all the pictures of the various acharyas in our line. So this is something that should be very clear to all of us, that such a sacred system should never be in any way considered malleable, that it can be shaped according to our whims or according to time and circumstance. That tendency will always be there because it is, what's that desire? What's that? Puja and pratishta. This desire for worship or reputation, some acknowledgement. This goes to the core of this false ego that I need to, the Munis have this, and Prabhupada gives a very clear description that Muni means someone who takes something and twists it in order to present it as so-called original. But this is in order to, we see, cheat people in general. So this is not, and we read, of course, what Prabhupada said clearly in some of his final words. That pastime with Narayan Maharaj took place in October. So this is 1 month or less before Srila Prabhupada departed. So he made it very clear that we are meant to cooperate. And cooperate doesn't mean I cooperate with myself, that I feel like I'm making some unique contribution, and therefore I have a duty to implement it, leaving aside any concerns by higher authority or God brothers. This is the danger. So disciple means discipline, not just while the spiritual master is present on the planet. Yes, it's very easy at that point that one has that personal association. And generally there's some, just like in the presence of your parents, you don't do anything wrong. You wait till you leave the house, and then you go do some nonsense. All right? So in this way, sometimes the tendency is there that, well, my spiritual master's not here, or he can't see what I'm doing, or he won't know, or I'm doing it on his behalf even. I know better than all of my God brothers that I can do something that will make a significant contribution. But this is not really our duty to try to improve on this ancient process. So specifically, we see that Devahuti is coming to, seemingly her son, but he's the incarnation of the personality of Godhead. And in the previous verse, it's described that she gives some reference to an axe. So the axe is used to cut down a tree, typically. That's its purpose. And so in this way, she was looking to him to cut all these attachments that we build up over an entire, not just one lifetime, but many lifetimes. This Chaita Dharpana Marjana process, it's seemingly more difficult for some than others. Because just like we've been cleaning in the temple here, with all the bhaktas and all the devotees. And sometimes we come to some place that hasn't been cleaned in years. And it takes an immense amount of effort to remove the dirt in order to get it clean and prepared for new paint. And so this way, for some, the heart takes more time to clean. And one cannot still see himself clearly. This process of self-realization means to cleanse the mirror of the heart. And then one can actually see himself. So this is the definition of Atma Tattva Gyan, the science of self-realization. So purification is the beginning. So Devahuti is asking that Lord Kapila should cut away all these material attachments. And here again, he's reiterating that what he's going to tell her is nothing new. And then again in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna the same thing. And then here we have Srila Prabhupada reiterating, basically on his deathbed, that you should cooperate. He doesn't say you should change. Cooperate means what I have given you. So this is a solemn pact between the disciple and the spiritual master. Not to be tempted to change things. And that one thinks he's more intelligent than his Guru Maharaj, Prabhupada used to say. Because he could see that tendency was there. He even coined that term. He didn't coin it, but at least introduced it in his kind. He said, don't be over-intelligent. Intelligence is fine. So what is the connotation to be over-intelligent? It means to think that you can apply another level of your tiny intelligence on something that has already been given. What does it say here? Serviceable and practical in every way. And in the 9th chapter in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, eternally. See, this is eternally performed. This knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, because it gives direct perception of the self by realization. It is the perfection of religion. It is eternal and joyfully performed. So it is eternal. It's never changing. You know, although we may see that sometimes things appear to change, that will only lead to what it says here, confusion. And that we can't afford to have confusion. You know, under the circumstances, we have to be very diligent. And Prabhupada gave a very perfect system. He took great time to consider what he was doing and how, and of course he was alluding to the fact that he had made changes, not changes, but had strengthened the system given by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who, on his deathbed, said that they should form a governing body. And the governing body should manage the affairs of the society. But that was not done. And instead, they put forward so many substitutions which were not in line with the Acharya's teachings or desires. And therefore, there was chaos, yes, infighting, and politics. So Prabhupada took great care to establish the GBC in order to prevent such confusion. So it is up to us to keep in mind that at some point we may be called upon to act in that capacity. It may not be something that one wants to do, but that is the definition of duty, that he does what's right despite his own misgivings, you know, which may be based on some, you know, personal, egoistic consideration. So this is so we're training at this point. Disciple means discipline. So we're training in order to be able to perform our duty like Arjuna, even if initially it may appear to be distasteful. But one has to be convinced. When you read Lilamrita, you can see how Prabhupada sacrificed everything. And in 11 years, created something which revived, you know, that science which appeared to be lost. Even in such recent times as the Acharya, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, in just a short period of time, again it was lost. After so much effort, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was preaching for so many years, so strongly. But all it takes is just a little discord, and things can be destroyed. So this is here, Devahuti is not coming to Kapila Dev, Lord Kapila, for something new. She's not saying, I want something different just for me. No, she's asking to be enlightened. Right? We discussed before that if one has a question, it means he doesn't have an answer. So she's not saying, please give me some specifics based on my circumstances. I'm a woman, I'm this, I'm a widow, I'm this, no. She wants it according, whatever is. And of course, these exchanges are meant for the benefit of all humanity for all time. So she's asking in such a way, like the sages at Naimisharanya, that their questions, how are they replied, are beneficial. Are beneficial because they will set the tone for the conversation, which becomes Śrimad Bhāgavatam. Not just some random, off the top of the head, I've got some problem and I want to get some clarity. No. They're asking those questions which are beneficial for all time, for all circumstances. The definition of auspicious. All time, all circumstances, for all people. So sometimes we use these terms, auspicious and inauspicious. But this is what it means. It doesn't mean that something is good for some mundane practice, for some wedding, for this. Of course, people do make those calculations. But my wedding, your wedding is not auspicious for all time, all circumstances, for all people. No. So we have to have perspective, right? That's the definition of intelligence, to understand things in their proper perspective, according to Srila Prabhupada's purport in the 10th chapter. So this is, of course, it's nice to hear these narrations and to appreciate how these things have become engraved in history and preserved so that no one can change them. Only a fool would take Srila Prabhupada's purports and try to elaborate this on something which, in one sense, Prabhupada, what did he say? The law books for the next 10,000 years. You can't take the law books, go into the municipal building downtown in Manhattan, and say, I'm going to change these laws. No. So what to speak? These are mundane laws, and they expand unlimitedly because everything is so fallible. So you have statutes upon statutes upon statute, subsection on subsection. You have hundreds of subsections in one statute because people can't understand what is real law. If you look at Manu Samhita, not that I'm saying you should look at Manu Samhita, but Prabhupada acknowledged that this is the law book for mankind. And if you read it, it's very elaborate. And the injunctions there are so strict that you would think that how is it possible? But yet these were the laws, and they were followed, and harmony and peace reigned for hundreds of thousands of years. But gradually sentimentalism creeped in, this I don't know what you want to call it, but based on imperfect knowledge, or Prabhupada said, incomplete knowledge of the complete. So therefore, that's why we need to study very carefully every book that Srila Prabhupada has thoughtfully considered to translate. It's not random. He didn't just pick Sri Ishopanishad out of thin air and say, I think I'll translate this. No. Carefully selected because of the purports and the content, so that everyone can understand what is real knowledge, what is real violence, the killer of the soul. Prabhupada said real violence is that person who misleads the people in general, these cheaters, because they rob them of the opportunity for self-realization by giving them some bogus conclusions. So they're called killers of the soul. So we also have to be very careful that we don't step into that realm as well, that we somehow or other shade for whatever reason, thinking that someone may not be eligible or qualified or this. No. Our duty is to deliver this message intact. Right? And some people may accept and some people may not accept. And your ability to preach according to time and circumstances should be very carefully used. Very carefully. If you become accustomed to speaking in that way based on, limited realization, then the tendency is that there'll be some less effect. Because you're not giving, just like if I give you adulterated milk, looks like milk, maybe even tastes a little bit like milk. This is a famous in India, everybody knows in India. There's no such thing as pure milk unless you're at the cow at the time he's being milked. And they even have a trick for that. Do you know that trick? The milkman goes to the cow, the water's already in the bucket. So it looks like he's milking into the bucket, but the water was already there. So it's already adulterated. And then they hand you the bucket because you weren't smart enough to look in the bucket first. So all these things are going on. People have unlimited ways to cheat. So we should not ever think that somehow or other I'm smarter than my Guru Maharaj. That if we just simply speak and repeat what Prabhupada has spoken, this is perfection. And we read this everywhere. This is perfection. Prabhupada elaborates in the lecture in Bombay that he gave on this very verse. He's saying that he was pointing out some of the small kids. One was maybe Mother Malati Saraswati. She was famous. She would go to everybody. She'd say, do you know who Krishna is? Do you know who Krishna is? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada said this is perfect knowledge. This is perfect. Simply repeating what you have heard from the spiritual master, what you have heard from the scripture. So we shouldn't think that there's some defect in repeating what we have heard verbatim. No, this is not. It doesn't require that I overlay my small realization. If you're dealing one-on-one with someone who's maybe in a situation where you can relate due to your experience coming to Krishna consciousness, that's fine. But not too much. Just enough to catch that person's interest again so that he will listen to you. That's all. You're trying to get them to listen. You want to hear from whatever they want to say. Only as much is required in order for you to find some relatable point. And then you begin the real conversation. In interviewing, the overall consideration is that you're going to conduct a conversation with a purpose. See? So you have to know what the purpose is. The person who you're interviewing doesn't have to know. You may be trying to lead them into something, which is the same thing. We're trying to get them to ask the right questions, to get them to be inquisitive, or to reveal something that we can use in order to elevate them. So many people have had, there's like this young man who came to the Sunday feast. I'd never seen him before. He says he lives here in Brooklyn. He'd been reading Prabhupada's books for years and teaching himself Sanskrit. Where have you been? He just decided to come to the temple. He had this whole book. I said, do you chant? Remember Prabhupada? He says, he chants, But every day he writes the Maha Mantra in Sanskrit 108 times. That's his chanting. He can read Sanskrit, but he doesn't understand the meaning. But he can see Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. He's doing this. So he said, very interesting. He said, I have most of Prabhupada's books. I said, oh, really? But he was talking, I must have been, maybe in a different life. So I said, wait, really? Okay. I said, so do you have this book? So I went over to the book stand, and there was a Coming Back. I said, then you must have read this. He said, I don't recognize this book. I said, oh, well, you must read this book. Especially if you have any idea that perhaps, maybe, that you were in a previous birth. He was thinking that maybe he was Indian. I said, it's possible. So there's always a point that you can use to catch a person's interest in this regard. And that's when we're speaking to someone, that is our intent. Not to just hear ourselves speak or to hear them speak. That the sound of my voice is, whatever. People are very much enamored sometimes. You have to be careful. So there's, anyway, we're very fortunate that we have so many relatable considerations to hear from Srila Prabhupada in his lectures, in his conversations, in his biography, in his final pastimes. And then we can juxtapose, how serious every single moment of Srila Prabhupada's time, every single moment was considering how to expand Krishna consciousness based on the order of his spiritual master and his deep realizations, of the philosophy that we can hardly consider. We can hardly consider. Prabhupada used to, you comment, Harisari was saying that Prabhupada would read his purports, and he was amazed. And Prabhupada was saying, yes, that, I have not written these. So this is the true meaning of via medium, transparent via medium. And so we should also try to emulate that, not imitate, not parroting, but to try to be as sincere as possible. Prabhupada says in his Vyas Puja homage, says, with all humility at my command. This is a genuine expression of feeling oneself not fully capable, but so much desiring to become an instrument that you will exercise humility in a manner that you would not ordinarily express. Sometimes, we always open up our, please accept my humble obeisances. We do this. But when we say that, are we really, expressing our humble obeisance, or are we just making some official statement, that's repeated? Most people just have it copy and paste, They make a template so that they never have to type it again. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, please. So what's humble about this act? If you're not even thinking, you're just pressing a button, So one should carefully think about how he's interacting on all levels of his interactions. Not just, with some peer, god brother, or superior in hierarchy, and, but with that humility has to be at every single level, every single interaction. When you're meeting people on the street, you have to genuinely feel that this person is a worthy recipient and that I should whatever is required in order to get their attention and give them Krishna consciousness, I should express. If that requires thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street, then that will invoke the presence of the super soul in both persons. Right? I mean, this is the essence of book distribution, and the essence of the Sankirtan Yajna. This is something which is very special. Why does Krishna consciousness seem to expand so much so than other places? Because the preaching gives one this realization how Krishna is in everyone's heart. You see it in every exchange. When you're on the street, their reaction to our chanting or their reaction to taking prasadam, we saw that this was lost in other institutions. And so they became, static. And meanwhile, in 11 years, Prabhupada was able to spread this movement all over the world because he somehow gave us a perfect formula that whether we understood it intrinsically or not, by simply following it, we got the results. And the world was changed. So we have to maintain, we can never stop preaching under any circumstances. We can never be diverted from our preaching is the essence. Books are the basis. Purity is the force, and utility is the principle. So all these things taken together give us a perfect parameter under which to conduct our activities. We don't require anything else. And that, and it's in a nutshell, this is, contains everything we need to know in order to conduct ourselves accordingly. But if we look outside and think that, no, let me become a scholar, let me become more familiar with these various works of the Goswamis, that's fine, but this is where you get into the realm of being over-intelligent. Prabhupada's very senior disciples who were engaged in the Sanskrit editing, many of them are no longer around. Because in their attempts to expand their historical perspective on the works of the Goswamis and others, they felt that Krishna consciousness, that ISKCON was something limited, because we're conducting what may seem to an outsider as just neophyte activities. Distributing books, they think we're simply salespeople, that we have no higher realization, otherwise we'd be in the forest of Braj, crying out for Krishna in imitation, like the gopis. No. So there's a great danger to become too exposed and so-called, you ask a person, someone wants to do this or do that, he wants to read all the purports and familiarize themselves with the various Goswamis' literature, that's fine. Said, have you read all of Srila Prabhupada's books? Have you listened to all of his lectures? Have you listened to all the conversations? If you have heard every single word that the founder Acharya has said, and you somehow or other think that there's something else required for your spiritual advancement, then you should reconsider your situation before it becomes a disaster, like our former God brothers, one of whom Prabhupada said, I give you permission to go to hell. Do you know that story about the Ryan? One of Prabhupada's senior Sanskrit editors, he was actually reading the Sanskrit in a lecture in Bombay on this specific verse. So he became a regular visitor to the Vrindavan Research Institute, which is just up the road from Krishna Balaram Mandir. And it has so many original works of the Goswamis, this and that. It has many other works as well. And he, at a certain point, he felt that ISKCON was just too limiting for his so-called academic pursuits. And so he asked Srila Prabhupada to give him his blessings that he could seek out another guru. And there's some precedent if one wants to take siksha, from some other devotee. But you'd have to consider that in the presence of an Uttama Adhikari, if you cannot get the information that you require through Tadvidi Pranipatena Pariprasnena Sevya, this by submissive inquiry and service, then you were doing something wrong. You were doing something wrong. So instead, he tried to jump over the head of the spiritual master. Very dangerous. And Prabhupada commented that on that right after this person left in New York in '76 at Rath Yatra. He said, don't try to jump over the head of the spiritual master. I think he even alluded to that child game, leapfrog. So we don't do that. But he wanted to do that. And so basically when you're reading, yes, these books are there. Prabhupada said, yes, some of these books should be read. But at what point should they be read? At what point does one think himself qualified? So if somehow or other you think yourself qualified, are you really qualified then? So these things all have to be taken very carefully, very introspectively, very humbly. That you're approaching, what do they call it, danger zone. Because you may not, Maya can even come to you through the purports of the Goswamis. Because your mind is seeing things through your limited intellect. So with that imperfect ability to analyze things, you may misunderstand it. Right? And then you'll think, how come Prabhupada hasn't given me my Siddha Pranali mantra? Then I must go to a guru who can give me Siddha Pranali. Okay? I must know what is my spiritual identity. Am I a gopi? Am I a cowherd boy? No. This is not just foolishness, it's called abject foolishness. But yet some people will tread into that realm and spend too much time meditating on that as opposed to meditating, how can I serve the spiritual master and push on his mission? What is required to push on this mission? First requirement is sincerity. And in that means that I should not deviate one iota from the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. It should be very clear. And that is practically our first and only duty. And however we can engage the conditioned souls in the service of that mission, that should be our expertise. How to engage others. And if we can accomplish that, then we are serving the spiritual master favorably. Anyabhilasata sunyam jnana karmadhyanavartam. So many different ways we understand that this unmotivated, unalloyed, uninterrupted. And then we also have to consider that. Whose senses am I serving? Rishikesha Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti Uchite. Am I serving my senses? Am I serving Krishna's senses? And that senses doesn't mean just the physical touch, taste, smell, feel. But there's also the mental, the ego. This is in one sense, how do you want to call it? The provocateur telling you to do this and do that based on this misidentification of the body and the self, as in previous purports and in future purports. This glories of devotional service. We should try to understand this very carefully, this subject matter. It doesn't say the glories of devotional service is how I become a scholar or how I, no. But one das anu das, how one becomes a servant of the servant of the servant. Parampara servant. Prabhupada used that term. Parampara servant. I'm a servant of my spiritual master. My spiritual master is a servant of his spiritual master. So that has to be clear. And my spiritual master should be completely in line. So we understand that. This is how Krishna consciousness will continue to spread. So we can read the translation again. O most pious mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga system, which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in every way. I like that way it's translated, serviceable. Right? It can be used. You know, if you keep something in good repair, then it remains serviceable. So this philosophy has to be protected and kept serviceable. If it becomes broken, the science as it is appears to be lost, the chain of disciplic succession was broken, then it's no longer serviceable. You know, so under the circumstances. So we have to ask questions. How can I be? You have to, press the button on that transmitter. The transmitter's off. But I can hear questions, of course. We'd have to repeat them again once. But it's very hard to hear questions on that. Any questions? Any comments? Yes, Mr. Arjunananda. But speak to the microphone like this so that the audience can hear you, but I hear you directly.
Okay. I was just thinking once one disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he happened to go to Radha Kund and started chanting names of Sri Radha. So the other disciple, he came to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and said, you know, this disciple has gone to Radha Kund because he feels that we're just chanting names of Krishna, but he wants to become more advanced. So therefore he has gone to Radha Kund to chant the names of Sri Radha. Then Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur said, oh, how sorry am I for this person, because he didn't understand we are chanting names of Krishna to attract Radha's mercy. Whereas just chanting Radha's name will not give that much mercy. So therefore, sometimes it seems that spiritual masters, what they are teaching, a fool, as you mentioned, an over-intelligent person may think that what my spiritual master is teaching is very rudimentary, something preliminary. I want to become more advanced. But actually, he doesn't know how the spiritual master's instruction contains the whole perfection of life.
Very good comment. There we saw that there's many disciples of Srila Prabhupada in ISKCON left and went to Radha Kund, thinking that Prabhupada described in the Nectar of Instruction, obviously Radha Kund is the highest place in the material world. And that service there at in the precincts of Govardhan and these holy kunds, that one. But if one goes there, just like taking medicine, if one takes medicine without the prescription of the doctor, without the supervision, then there can be a very adverse reaction. And in many cases, that's what we saw. These people eventually left. And then what happened? Because they couldn't sustain themselves having left the shelter, because shelter means specifically that I am protected. As long as I am following, then I have the shelter. I'm eligible. But once you leave the shelter, then you're subject to all the modes of material nature coming again, catching you under their influence. And so you leave, you lose your taste, you lose your position. basically you lose everything up to your life. I saw many of these people degraded and back to their former situations. So they may think that I have, whatever, become a great scholar, but because they're just like the impersonalists, Prabhupada says they have to fall down. Arya Krishna Padam Padam Tada. They come back down into the material platform and have to open up hospitals, perform some humanitarian welfare work. Because there was no taste, there was no ruchi. Kevala Ananda Kanda. They didn't experience it. Yet we're experiencing it every day. If one is open and his heart is gradually being cleansed, then more and more he relishes the association of devotees, the holy name, the Lord's beautiful form, and everything related to it. You know, and he's not a loser in any way. Did you have a question, Bhakti Ryan? Don't hold the mic too close to your mouth. Yeah, just speak like that.
I was just going to make a comment that we heard very similar kind of inspiration from Varshana Maharaj in New Vrindavan. He's a sadhu who's never really left New Vrindavan. He's been in one place, and he has just been studying Srila Prabhupada's books. And he said to us that, you know, even the most esoteric possible truths in Krishna consciousness, and he talked about Siddha Pranali and all of these things, that, you know, Prabhupada himself will reveal them to us if we're just extremely devoted to following his teachings and reading his books. That's it. Everything is there in Prabhupada's books. He kept saying that, you know, even these things that we think are very esoteric. So I really appreciate that point.
Now tell me again in your voice so that I can hear it, because I can't hear it. Okay? Just a gist.
Varshana Maharaj said a very similar thing about Siddha Pranali and the process of understanding your spiritual forms in all of Prabhupada's books, Nectar of Devotion.
Who said that?
Varshana Maharaj.
Varshana Maharaj.
And he's not even left New Vrindavan. He's stayed there his whole life.
Well, he has left New Vrindavan, but that's besides the point. This is, but the essence, the comment is correct, that everything is there. We don't have to go anyplace. When I was in Varshana, speaking of Varshana Maharaj, we were stopped. There are 4 hills that are considered to be the 4 faces of Lord Brahma. And so we were walking between Old Varshana and New Varshana. And we sat down to chant Gayatri. And one of the, persons living in those precincts there, he saw us, and after we chanted Gayatri, he came up to us, and he had never met Western disciples, the devotees at that point. So this is, and so he was quite surprised, and he invited the devotees to come and see his bhajan kutir. He had taken up residence in one of the abandoned buildings, of which many dot the landscape in that area. And it was an old, it's hard to say what it was, but it was almost like a turret of a castle, just a round, small building, but it had a roof. And we went inside his bhajan kutir, and I remember at the time I took a photo. I had my camera. And when we walked in one, they have these, in the Indian buildings, old or new, they have these niches where they place some religious artifact, a picture, or this deity. So he was doing some bhajan. He had a tempura and a harmonium. And in the niche above the instruments, where he obviously was a sitting place, was a pink paperback Nectar of Devotion. Srila Prabhupada. He had never met devotees. He'd never met Prabhupada. He had been working in Delhi, and he somehow found a Nectar of Devotion. It wasn't given to him by a devotee. He found Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion. And after reading Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion, he gave up his material job in life, and he retired, and he went, and he was not old. He was maybe in his 30s at the time. And he went to Varshana to become Krishna conscious based on what he'd read in Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion. So this is very interesting how these things transpire. So the highest knowledge is actually in Srila Prabhupada's books. And based on your ability to invoke that reciprocation that you do to your sincerity, because everyone will have this experience. When you read Bhagavad Gita, when you first come, and then again after 6 months, again after 6 years, it has obviously, based on whatever, if you've practiced diligently, sincerely, then your realization will be concomitant. It will come up along with your level of appreciation. So this is where we don't know where that person was in his previous life, Suchinam, Srimatam, Gehe, Yoga, Brasta. But he was able to, just from reading Nectar Devotion, surrender everything and renounce everything and go to Varshana. So how is it that when we're reading Nectar Devotion, maybe on our level, but we're not impelled in the same way to completely forget all ideas of developing some external connections once again after already previously surrendering everything. But we say it's a gradual process. But instantaneously, like I said, sincerity means that when many of my Garbhas have all expressed, and God says have all expressed that upon meeting Srila Prabhupada and hearing from him, all doubt and confusion immediately was dispelled, just by hearing from him personally in his physical presence. And Prabhupada says in different places that this is actually the test of the spiritual master, that he removes all doubt and illusion from the disciple. And automatically a clear path forward on the path of bhakti is opened up. In fact, anyway, there's so many analogies. Pick one. But so you can get the highest realization from what someone may consider to be a simple book like Krishna book, the summary study of the 10th canon of the Śrimad Bhāgavatam, Prabhupada's perfect realizations. So what is this? The spiritual master has somehow or other, his potency has left because he's no longer on the planet, that these books are now relegated to some inferior place in history? No. So he reasons ill who tells that Vaishnavas die, when thou art living still and sound. A Vaishnav dies to live, and living spreads the holy name around. So, but sometimes, like I said, and all this Vaishnava literature is there, no doubt. And certainly at some point, one can maybe fulfill some intellectual yearning for whatever reason. But for myself, I simply want to become an instrument in any capacity, because life is short. What does it matter? If my only desire is to serve the spiritual master, chite te kuriya aikya, and have my conscience purified, then what else do I have to do besides sweep the floor in the temple, or clean the bathrooms, or distribute books? Is there a need to do anything else? Do I have to have some aspiration to become sannyasi, guru, GBC? No. I simply have to desire to somehow or other in this one lifetime to get the mercy of the spiritual master by rendering sincere service. That's it. And whatever you need in order to focus on that, that's what you should concentrate on. And anything that distracts you from that should be rejected. So, any other questions or comments? All glories to Varshana Maharaj. Perfect example of someone who simply by, and you know what Varshana Maharaj's service was, right? Do you know what Maharaj's service was? Huh? What? He was Well, not just training draft animals. He was doing whatever was required in order to maintain the project. Driving the tractor, training the draft animals, tilling the land, planting the crops. This is all devotional service. But someone may say, oh, this is just a tractor driver. Or millions of people in India are training draft animals. Many millions of people in India are now driving tractors. And the highest rate of suicide in India is what? Amongst the farmers. Because they're pushed into situations where they buy tractors and they incur so much debt. And now there's so much competition, they can't make a living, they can't pay their bills, so they commit suicide. Very sad situation. This modernization, industrialization. Krishi Goraksha Vanijam. The duty of the Vaishyas is to protect the cows. It doesn't require a tractor to do that. Any other questions or comments? Śrimad Bhāgavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Radha Gundadev ki jai.